He closes the door. I'm thinking, okay, he wants privacy. He wants to ask me some questions. I didn't look up until I heard a sound that was unfamiliar to me. Turns out it was the sound of putting in the clip. And when I look up, he's got a Glock trained on me. Immediately,
So, Tiwanda, this happened on April 8th, 2016.
Yes.
There's a lot of new airmen out there now.
Mm-hmm.
Since then, tons. You know, around that time, I've been in 17 years, and I was in during that time, obviously. And it was a big deal. It was a big deal because it's one of those things where we practice for it, we train for it, we hear about it, but we never think it's going to happen to us. A lot of people don't take it seriously when we do the exercises because it's not going to happen to us, right?
Exactly.
Like that's not possible. That would not happen here. And so it actually happened to you, the worst case scenario, the thing that we think is impossible. And for all those out there who, you know, aren't familiar with it because there's so many new folks in since 2016, I was hoping you could run us through that day for anyone unfamiliar with you and your story that day.
Absolutely. So given a little bit of background, we had a tech sergeant who had cross-trained into the Air Force from the Army, into special ops. And long story short, this airman went AWOL for 10 days. When upon his return from his AWOL trip, we went into normal procedure as far as an Article 15 / court-martial / non-judicial punishment. And he decided he wanted to do the court-martial. He didn't want an Article 15. So we went through the legal battle between, he turned down the Article 15. He wanted court-martial. This situation went from a 1-month process to a 7-month process, between court-martial proceedings, ADC, defense attorneys, firing defense attorneys, got a new defense attorney. She went on maternity leave, waited till she came back, fired her, got his own civilian. I mean, this thing drew out for the longest. Because of what was happening, there were also some things happening in the background. He was the author of a couple of websites that were against leadership. He was inciting airmen in the dorms against leadership. He was taking airmen and turning them against leadership, telling them things that, like, we didn't have their best interests. We were trying to kick them out. They should fight they should fight everything that we were throwing at them, and that leadership was the enemy. At the same time, the questions started coming up. I personally asked the questions illegal. What are we doing? Why are we continuing to let this airman drag us along? When is enough enough? When do we say, no more delay tactics? This is what we're going to do. We're paying this person every day for the last 7 months when this should have been a 1-month process. At the same time, we know he's a threat to leadership due to the things that he was putting on the website, due to the things that he was saying to the airmen. We were told things like, we can't do anything about it because he hasn't directly threatened anybody. Let's give him LOR for the things that he's saying against leadership on the website. They directly linked the website to him. They wanted to roll it into the court-martial. All of a sudden, one day, he pops up and says, I'll take the Article 15. It threw us for a loop because he took this long to fight what we originally offered. But legal was really adamant about, hey, if he's saying he's going to take the Article 15, let's do it. We went against everything that we normally stand for. You don't give Article 15s on Fridays. we're not gonna, we didn't postpone it. We made sure we did everything, crossed T's, dotted I's, the whole nine. And you said something earlier that made so much sense, and it hit home, because we don't think it's going to happen to us. We think this is going to happen somewhere else. This happens to everybody else. We didn't take it seriously. We knew there were some things that were off. We knew that there were some missing pieces of information. We knew that he posed a threat. There were incidences where people felt like they were being followed, but couldn't prove it. We would leave together at night, especially when it was dark, because we would make comments like, hey, we're all going to leave out of here together because you never know what's going to happen. So-and-so might be waiting around the corner, and we would laugh it off. We didn't take it as seriously as we should have, which is normal. We had the gut instinct, but we didn't trust our gut. We allowed ourselves to either be talked out of what we felt was happening, or we were considered to be paranoid. So, we kind of didn't take it as seriously as we should. That morning, Friday morning, we had an 8:30 appointment. This tech sergeant was always prompt, on time, very respectful, very courteous. Even that morning, he came into the office around 8:15, 8:20, knocked on the door, came in, and it was a normal morning, Friday morning. I'm saying, hey, Tech Sergeant so-and-so, how you doing this morning? Would you like some coffee? It's pretty early in the morning. The whole time he's saying, yes, First Sergeant, no, First Sergeant. I'm good, First Sergeant. Everything's fine. He's in his blues. Everything's normal. Everything's proceeding. At one point, I'm at my desk and I'm getting my paperwork together. And most people, this is another one of those hindsight is 2020s. Most people, when they come to see the First Sergeant, they want privacy. So it's me, it's him. We're in the office. He's been to my office many times by himself. When I called and said, hey, I need to see you, he was like, yes, First Sergeant, I'm there. He was on time every time. So I'm doing some paperwork, getting ready for this appointment, and he's in there, and he stands up and he walks toward the door. I never look up. I'm just minding my business. I never look up because it's just a normal thing for us. He closes the door. I'm thinking, okay, he wants privacy. He wants to ask me some questions. I didn't look up until I heard a sound that was unfamiliar to me. Turns out it was the sound of putting in the clip. And when I look up, he's got a Glock trained on me. Immediately my mind goes, is this for real? Is this really happening? And I said that out loud. I said, for real? And he says, yes, First Sergeant. And my next question was, seriously? And then once again, he says, yes, First Sergeant. And I remember saying, well, okay, I'm thinking to myself, okay, what is happening here? What are my options? He's got this weapon trained on me. I can't make any sudden moves. He's watching my hands. He's making sure I don't reach for my phone. He's making sure I don't make any sudden moves. And I asked him, what can I do? Now I forget my exact words, but my question to him was something to the effect of, what do you need from me? What can I do? And he says, unfortunately, it's too late for that, First Sergeant. So I'm like, okay.
So at that point, like, were you legitimately afraid for your life, or do you think it hadn't quite sunk in at that point?
I was still trying to process what was happening. I remember the feeling of if I could feel my blood drain through my whole body, I felt that. I felt like every bit of blood just drained out of, just down.
It's almost like his demeanor didn't match the situation.
It didn't. And we're trained in active shooter protocols and scenarios and CBTs that your active shooter is going to be agitated, they're going to be yelling, they're going to be sweating, they're going to be doing this, they're going to be doing that. And he did none of this. He didn't raise his voice. He was very polite, very respectful, not agitated, not nervous, nothing.
I think that's another part of the story that is confusing to, that would be really confusing to see a weapon, to have all the training of the active shooter event in our mind and what we would expect it to look like. This wasn't it. It didn't look like that. The guy treated it like every other day and was completely calm and yet had this weapon. And I think that makes it even harder to process because it's not ever what we train for.
It's not. It's exactly opposite of what we train for. It's exactly opposite of how we are told to respond. That brings me to about 3 weeks after this incident. It was time for my annual active shooter CBT training. I failed it because I answered the questions based on my situation. And wow. I remember telling them, I said, whoever wrote this CBT, I want to personally talk to them because it is so far offhand, or they need to make revisions to it because that's apparently not how they all go. Had I done those things that they told me to do in the CBTs, I would be dead. You know, make a noise, throw something at them, duck. I had no room to do any of that. We were in a maybe 12 by 12 room with no windows in the door. No one knew what was happening in that office. No one knew the situation that I was in that office. Had I done those things, had I been able to escape, one of the scenarios I went through in my head was, I need to get to the door so that I can get out of here and alert people. I did that by saying I needed to open the door because the door was locked. Well, he got up and unlocked the door. He got up and opened the door. But had I been able to do that, I wouldn't have made it down the hall because he would have been right behind me. And it would have opened up a dangerous situation for everybody else in the squadron. That wouldn't have ended well. So as things were progressing, you know, he basically told me his mission, my job here is to call my commander, pick up the phone and call him to your office. And I asked him not to make me do that. That's not a position I wanted to be in. I did not want to call him to danger. But I also knew that I had no choice. Because once again, if I refused and I were shot, I'm leaving the squadron open to danger. Once I'm gone, there's nothing stopping him from having free reign of the squadron. The part that I struggle with is making that phone call. My commander and I had never discussed a safe word. We never discussed what would we do in the face of danger. What happens if this scenario were to happen? So what I tried to do was act out of character. My character, my personality is, you know, commander first sergeant relationship. Hey, you know, hey sir, how you doing? What, you know, just everyday talk. When I called him that morning, I was very short, matter of fact, professional. When he answered the phone, I said, good morning, sir. This is your first sergeant. Which I was, in my mind, I knew that he was listening. I knew that he was watching. I knew that he was waiting for me to say or do something to warn him. He says, hey, Shirt, what's going on? What's up? And I said, I need you to come to my office. And he's like, why do I need to come to your office? We got an appointment in like the next 10 minutes. And I said, yes, sir, I understand that, but I need you to come to my office. And he says, is he here? And I said, yes, sir. And when I said that, I think he started to pick up on something was different about me. Something was different in my voice. I'm sure my voice was trembling, but I said, yes, sir. And he got quiet, and there was an awkward pause. And he says, okay, I'll be there. And it was, I don't know how long it took between the hang up of the phone and him getting down there. But between then, I had managed to talk him, the tech sergeant, into opening the door to give about a 2 to 3 inch window. Because once again, that was me trying to find an out. When I heard him coming down the hallway, I never looked away from the door. When he got to the door, he kind of stopped and he looked in that little 3 inch window. And I sat there with my hands on my desk, and I just looked at him and he looked at me, and I know that I was trembling, and he knew something was happening at that moment. I saw his face, he saw mine, and I know that he knows something was happening. And he had a choice: turn around and go back down the hall and work on some things, or alert somebody or do something. But he decided, I'm going to go in there. And so when he came in, I never looked over to the right, which is where he was sitting with the gun still trained on me. But the commander came in, and he immediately looked at me. He stepped into the door, and he looked behind the door, which is where the tech sergeant was sitting. He stepped in and he closed the door behind him. And this is where, when you asked me earlier what my thought process was, and at that point is when I thought that we're not gonna make it out of here.
Because you're both in the room with him now.
We're both in the room with him. Door closed again. No one knows what's going on. No one knows there was danger in the office, because I'm sure he didn't alert anybody or tell anybody, hey, I'm going down here if something happens. I don't know if he knew the extent of what he was walking into.
I think he had to have known just by the look on your face. He's probably never seen your face like that, your demeanor like that.
Never.
He knew something was off, but I don't think anyone would ever guess in a million years what the situation actually was. In his mind, it was probably bad, but he's a commander. He's experienced angry individuals before.
Mm-hmm.
He's probably had a tons of different conversations, and he's talked down people. He's helped people out. He's helped people stay in. He's probably felt confident in his ability to go in there and properly handle the situation. But this was that 1 in a million where it was outside of what he was capable of fixing, unfortunately.
Right.
No one would have ever guessed that that's what was on the other side of the door.
No one would have guessed that was on the other side of the door. And him also being a special operator. I'm sure he thought that he could handle the situation. He came in and closed the door and sat down. There were 2 chairs across from me. Tech sergeant was in the far right. He sat in the far left. And they began to speak. The tech sergeant was saying things like, you know, you've ruined too many lives. And, you know, he was just, as he was talking, he was escalating.
So he was like working himself up and making,
He was working himself up.
so you could visually see it getting worse.
Yes.
Did he seem
I could
emotional at that
see it.
point?
No, but he was angry. And what I think happened was at that moment, the commander's Colonel Schroeder steps in and he says, hold on, let me tell you about your actions. Let's talk about you and your part in this. But as soon as he said that, he stood up and they engaged. And if there were three things happening at that moment. He was talking, they were engaging, and he told me to get out of there, shirk go. But at the same time, I heard gunshots. They were immediate. There were 3 gunshots before I even got out of the office. I heard the sound of the gunshots. I heard the sound of 2 of them actually hit the commander. I heard the sound that he made when they hit him. I was able to get to the door and get out and run down the hall and yell active shooter. By this time, I'm hearing 9 more gunshots behind me. And I don't know if commander's down. I don't know if he's behind me. I don't know if he's coming after me because he doesn't want me to get away, because he knows that I'm the only witness. I don't know what's happening, but I know that I'm running down the hall and I'm yelling at people to stay in their offices, call 911, active shooter, the whole active shooter protocol.
Did they believe you?
Believe it or not, when you yell active shooter, people like to look out their door. It's instinct, but they heard gunshots. And of course, when they're hearing gunshots, people are like, what's going on? They're looking out the door and like, get back in the office, take cover, 911, call 911. We have an active shooter. And I'm saying this as I'm running down this long, seemed like the longest hallway ever. And I get around the corner, I find an empty office and I keep the light off. I close the door and I don't hear any more shots, but I'm calling. I pick up the phone and I called security forces and I told them, this is still active shooter protocol. This is who I am. This is where I am. This is who it was. I don't know that, I know the commander's been hit. I don't know his status. They're in my office. I don't know what's happening right now, but I gave them every bit of information. If anything were to happen to me, I want them to know exactly who it was, where it was, and what happened. Because I still didn't know if commander was down, he was down, was he looking for me? Was he walking through the squadron? I don't know what's happening at the time. I just know to take cover and stay hidden until I hear something that tells me that we get the all clear. We finally got the all clear. Security forces came in, they cleared the situation. That's when, well, at the time we didn't know if he was on the run or if he had gotten out. Was he looking for me? I was considered a threat still to him because I'm the only witness. I can testify against him. I know what happened. So there was that security portion of it until security forces breached the door, because what happened was between the gunshots, between the struggle, the door ended up closing. Remember, the door was locked. The door closed and they were locked in. No one could get in. So they were searching for me to get the key to get entry into my office. And once they gained entry into my office, they found both bodies. Commander had been shot.